Hey there. So I'd like to talk today about something that isn't really talked about very much in relation to aging. When I search through YouTube and I look at aging and loss, I come across an awful lot of physical and biological literature around what we lose when we grow old, but not so much on the sort of what I would call existential, psychological, spiritual kind of losses that we all have to face if we live long enough. And I want this video to be a bit of a discussion, a reflection, an invitation to think about maybe something that isn't really thought about very often. And I certainly realize in my own work as a scholar and a researcher who has spent a lot of time talking to older people and listening to them tell me about what it's like to grow old, I realize a lot of the time that I haven't really thought about or reflected on the fact that when I get old, I'm going to have to meet some of these realities, and it's not easy. It's not easy to meet them. I'm not here to tell you what you should do about those challenges or to fix them quickly or to offer some sort of counseling space. I'm here simply to invite you to reflect on some of the most, what I would argue, inevitable and fundamental challenges that most of us are going to face if we are lucky enough to live long enough on this earth. And they're all about loss. They're all about loss. And with my research teams over the years, I've had the chance to talk to many older people. And one of the things that always comes up in those conversations when people really get down to the nitty gritty of, well, what have been the challenges about growing old? The biggest one has been loss. And I would argue, there are three major kinds of loss that we go through if we live long enough. And the losses come kind of thicker and faster the longer we live. The first one is simply our body. And there is actually a lot of content on YouTube around the loss of the body and bodily integrity. Biologically, our bodies begin to break down and we lose. The thing that we lose, though, is not just our body, we lose the capacity our body gave us to connect with the world in ways that we really felt alive doing. So I can remember talking to older people, for example, who have always loved painting or reading or drawing. And because of deterioration that's irreparable in something like their eyesight or their hearing, they're unable to appreciate that simple aspect of the world that they used to appreciate in a way that gave them access to a feeling of beauty or a sense of creativity. And there's a huge loss there. You've lost a way in which you connected with this world. For others, it might be, I've lost the capacity to walk in the way that I always loved because walking gave me something, some way of connecting to the world around me. And as our bodies slowly begin to break down or their function diminishes, we lose something vital, and that is the capacity to connect to the world in the way we used to, or the way we always have. The capacity to plumb into parts of ourselves that are creative or make us feel alive. That's the first one. So the first one there is bodily function and health. The second one is relationships. The longer we live, the more likely it is that we will lose people that we are close to. And again, I've talked to many, many older people whose biggest struggle is how to be in this world without the people that they have closest connections and bonds to. And I remember talking to one old woman who I believe she was probably in her 90s at the time I was speaking to her. She told me that she'd lost everyone that she ever felt close to. Two husbands, all of her siblings, even her son. She'd outlived her son. And she told me that, I think she said, she put it that I'm strong enough to admit to you that I've lost everyone I ever felt close to. And I'm not afraid to say that I'm ready to leave this world too. So for her, there was this real sense that being here without all of the people that made it meaningful for me, which were my closest bonds, it's very difficult for me to rediscover meaning when I've lost all of those relationships. So the second big factor is, yeah, losing meaningful relationships. And again, the longer we live, the sort of faster the momentum of loss in relation to those relationships. We lose more and more of them, basically. And then, of course, another one is identity. I remember an older man saying to me in an interview once that the day that he retired, he hadn't predicted it, but he felt like he dropped off a cliff. He just dropped off a cliff. And he didn't really know who he was in the world without the identity that he'd always had from the work that he did and the roles that he undertook. And once those roles are kind of over, we've lost them, they've finished. We're no longer a full time mother, as we always used to be, or a full time father, or whatever our occupation may have been. When our roles are gone, again, we've lost a part of ourselves. And I think the one thing that can be striking about old age is that, as I said, the longer we live, the more those losses gain momentum, and a sort of barrage of losses continually in the body domain, in the identity domain, in the relationship domain come thick and fast. And I think that many older people, one, have never thought about that reality um, earlier in their life. And I certainly didn't think about it. Of course, we all lose things, and loss is a part of life, but perhaps not the onslaught of loss that is so pervasive the longer we live. So many older people, I remember saying, well, I've never really thought about that. It kind of just hit me and has started to hit me. And I'm realizing the sort of existential reality of that. It's big and it's challenging and it's not easy to make sense of and it's frightening. And it makes me feel alone because I am not plugged into the world in the same way I used to be, because for all of my life, I sort of, those things, my body and my capacity to interact with the world around me, my relationships, my identity, they were the ways that I connected to this world. And now that they're not here anymore and I've lost them all, I don't know how to reconnect to it. I don't know how to plug into this world. And I've seen a lot of older people in that existential dilemma, but never having really thought about it. Because who teaches us about that existential reality? Where do we learn that that's a possibility for us if we grow older? As we grow older, where do we think about what we might do to face that reality? How do we support people who are in that reality? What spaces and places exist in our society to devote to thinking about, caring about, exploring that part of growing old, and that existential reality in relation to loss? So, I mean, this video is really just an invitation to reflect on. It's not meant to be morbid per se, but it is meant to bring to the surface some of the one of the or some of the, whatever, whichever way you want to put it, less palatable sides of aging. I imagine, and I know actually, that there are many beautiful gifts in growing old, but there are also some very hard challenges to growing old. And the one that I've articulated in this video is simply loss. It can be a very difficult one. I think the surgeon Atul Gawande once put it that old age is a series of continuous losses. And I think he's right. In my experience of researching, interviewing, sharing deep conversations with older people in my work, I'd say that's true. Old age, the longer we live, presents us with a series of continuous losses. And as a society and individuals, we need to bring that issue into the light and discuss it rather than sweeping it under the rug, because when it hits you, it can hit you hard.